I mean, we see this all the time. People like you vote for a man that is purposely going to hurt so many other communities, but as long as it doesn't affect you, you're okay. But the moment that it affects you, that's the only time you care.
To love the fact that their family is being negatively affected because I didn't vote the same way that you did is... I've got far left-leaning friends.
You voted for a man who's a predator. You voted for a man who sexually assaulted women and made jokes about it. You voted for a man that has decades-long racism and bigotry, and yet you still voted for him. And now you're crying because it's affecting you personally. And yes, that's why I love this for you, because you should feel the same exact way that everybody else did, because your vote was meant to hurt other communities.
I love this for you. I love this. Nice. I love this for you. I love to see you fail. I love to see your family be affected and hurt because you voted for Trump. Yeah, I voted for Trump. Absolutely. Did I know he was going to increase the tariffs? Yes, I did. However, I thought that the infrastructure would be set up prior for small business to come back to America and manufacture in America. So to wish ill on someone and to love the fact that they're suffering, to love the fact that their family is being negatively affected because I didn't vote the same way that you did is... It really is. It shouldn't matter. Anyone that enters my life, I'm going to judge you of who you are, how you are as a human being. Are you kind? Are you polite? Are you sincere? That's how I judge you, not who you voted for. I've got far left-leaning friends. I got far right-leaning friends. It doesn't matter to me. I like you based on who you are. But to see someone hurt and their business fail and their family be affected because they didn't vote the way you did, I'm sorry, a lot of you are
Let's dig a little deeper into the small business owner's original plea. It's important to understand the context of his initial struggles before we get into the political back and forth. This is where he explains how the tariffs are specifically impacting his business.
All right, I hate asking for help. I'm not asking for any handouts, but I'm a small business owner that is directly being affected by the 104% tariff that has been put on China. I import alloy wheels for cars, and I do somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 containers a year, which is a small business in regards to this industry. At 104%, I am absolutely going to implode and will not last 6 months. So with that said, I'm asking, is there anybody out there that has connections with manufacturing facilities, specifically alloy wheels, either in the United States or outside in these lesser tariffed countries like Mexico, Indonesia, Thailand, India? I need to find another source. I've emailed a lot of these companies and cannot get a response. And I just don't know if it's because I'm a small business or what exactly it is. So anybody's out there that can help or shed some light, maybe provide some information that would be helpful, I would really greatly appreciate it, because if not, it's just a small business here that's gonna go under, and I'll be back to digging ditches again, which I'm not scared to do, but it's a little harder to do with a wife, 2 kids, and at 45 years old. So let me know if you guys have any suggestions. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
So it looks like we have yet another Trump voter coming to the internet looking for, I'm assuming, sympathy?
I didn't really want to have to get on here and do this, but I had to. I called 2 weeks ago to get a quote on these fiberglass steaks because we need some more steaks this year. I got a quote, 83 cents. I called the man this morning. I said, hey, I know these tariffs are crazy and everything going on. I said, what can you do me on those fiberglass steaks now if we needed a load? He said, Taylor, you don't want to hear this price and I'm about to give you. He said, each of those steaks now is going to be $1.74 a piece. So that's just to let you know a little bit of what we're going through out here on our farm and what farmers in general are going through.
Wow, prices doubled. That's a massive hit for any business, especially a farm. But it's not a random act of economic aggression. It's a direct result of the policies that you voted for. The woman's reaction is spot on. Are we supposed to be surprised by this?
These tariffs, not the best thing for our country. I voted for Trump.
Let's see, check my pockets. Nope, empty. In this pocket? Nope, empty. No sympathy here. You voted for the tariffs, so I'm confused why you're confused, why the price of things are increasing. You voted against your farm, So I'm confused why you're confused that you're struggling on said farm. And now you are getting exactly what you voted for. Trump said he was gonna do these tariffs, and now you're getting those tariffs. So again, I'm confused how you're confused. Once again, it's giving, well, yeah, I knew that the bad stuff was gonna happen to other people, but I didn't think that it was gonna happen to me.
They've already seen it get much better. The price of groceries are substantially down.
No, they're not. Are you kidding me? If you drag your Cheeto Puff looking face to a grocery store, you'd see prices are through the roof. I'm over here clipping coupons like it's my second job just to bring prices down. But I do give you credit. You do produce something more than any other president has, which is super affordable. Bullshit sandwiches. And these people are eating them up.
Groceries are substantially down. I think someone's been living in a golden tower far away from reality. The audacity to make such a claim when anyone with a grocery list can tell you prices are outrageous. And bullshit sandwiches? Yep, that's exactly what it feels like. Now, this next video takes a deep dive into why these tariffs affect food prices, specifically addressing the "we don't buy food from China" crowd. It's a fantastic breakdown of the interconnectedness of global supply chains.
Ricky Bobby, you about to learn today. We gonna go fast, so I hope that your little pea brain can keep up. So if you don't think these China tariffs aren't affecting the food supply, let me break it down for you. I'm Sonia Roselli. I own a skincare brand, and I have been importing for the last 10 years, so I know a little bit about supply chains. And when the shit is, it's about to get real. Here's how the China tariffs will affect our food supply and why we all about to go hungry. So it's a goddamn good thing that we're all on these GLP-1s. First of all, when it comes to the food supply, farmers get most of their fertilizer, pesticides, that kind of shit from China. They get a lot of the equipment from China. If they don't have any of that shit to grow food, guess what? Food supply shortages, no food on the shelves, your fucking ass is gonna be hungry. Second of all,
Ricky Bobby, you about to learn today? Love that energy. It's so frustrating trying to explain basic economics to people who have their fingers in their ears. This woman is breaking down exactly how interconnected everything is. It's not just about what you directly buy from China, it's about all the components and inputs that come from China.
there's this little thing called secondary packaging. And as someone who makes product, let me show you what that means. This is secondary packaging. This is primary packaging. This primary packaging has to go into the secondary packaging. What does that mean? Secondary packaging, most of the shit comes from China. So your frozen meals, the little bag that your peas get put in, that all goes into the secondary packaging that comes from China. So what does that mean? That means if they don't have any secondary packaging to put the food in, the food is gonna sit there and rot. And what does that mean? That means your bitch is gonna go hungry. That means that there's not gonna be any food. What else comes from China? The parts that goes on the trucks. That means all of that fucking truck that is taking your frozen yogurt from one part of Texas to the other part of Texas.
The packaging, the truck parts for refrigeration. She's listing real tangible examples. This isn't rocket science, folks. It's basic supply chain management. When you disrupt one part of a complex system, the whole thing grinds to a halt. And who suffers? Everyday people trying to feed their families.
That means if there is no refrigeration on that truck and they can't get a part from China, that means all your fucking frozen milk and all your fucking pizzas and all your fucking shit is gonna be melted, sitting in that Texas fucking heat, rotting. Yeah, it's gonna fuck the supply chain and it's gonna fuck the shit that's on the shelves. What does that mean? It means your bitch ass is gonna go hungry again, they ain't no food to sell. What else comes from China? Raw ingredients. That means the ingredients that private label manufacturers here in the States need to make our fucking food. Things like MSG, preservatives, citric acid, all of that shit that goes in our food to keep it stable, all comes from China. If we don't have it, guess what? We can't make it. That means your ass is fucking hungry again. Right, Nico? Other thing is you're like, well, we'll just go to Mexico or Canada. They gotta have the same thing. They don't have infinite supply to feed the entire United States and Mexico and their own country, right?
Okay, this woman is my spirit animal. She's laying it all out with absolute precision. The raw ingredients, the preservatives, the stabilizers, it's all part of the global market. And the idea that Mexico and Canada can just magically pick up the slack for the entire US, that's just naive at best. Dangerously misinformed at worst.
So there's gonna be shortages. That means there's gonna be no food on the shelves. That means your bitch ass is gonna be hungry. That's right. It's not just cheap made in China. It is every little piece of the supply chain that goes into making food and product and ingredients and farming and planting and everything that we need to keep the food on the table in this country. So it's not that simple, Ricky Bobby. Sometimes someone says China has nothing to do with our food supply. Now you know.
Preach. It's not just about the final product, it's about the entire ecosystem of manufacturing and distribution. This detailed explanation should be required viewing for anyone who thinks tariffs are a simple solution. You want to make America great again? Maybe start by understanding how things actually work. And speaking of how things actually work, here's some breaking news that might just make some heads explode in Mar-a-Lago. The courts are chiming in, and it's not good for the tariff lovers.
Guys, a federal court has now decided that President Taco can no longer hold the U.S. economy hostage. They have deemed the Trump tariffs under the Emergency Powers Act illegal, which means that he cannot implement them. We just got this news literally 10 minutes ago. Now we're making a video about it. So it looks like a court that checks and balances system of the United States may have just saved the U.S. economy. Let's see what happens. I have a feeling Trump is probably going to crash out tonight. I don't know what he's going to say. I don't know what they're going to try to do. But this is some good news. Hopefully puts away any sort of nonsense that's going to happen later on with these ridiculous trade deals that aren't even getting passed.
President Taco is just chef's kiss. Federal courts ruling Trump's tariffs illegal? Now that's what I call checks and balances. It's a huge win for economic stability and sanity. It also perfectly illustrates how a single person's arbitrary decisions can wreak havoc on an entire economy. Now, let's take a little stroll through the grocery store, because while some people are busy blaming everyone else, the price tags tell a very different story. $20 for lettuce, $8 for eggs, and the man in the MAGA hat's face? Priceless. Literally. This is the reality check for people who think tariffs are just an abstract economic term. They translate directly to higher prices on basic necessities. The laughs and thwacks are just the cherry on top. Another great example of the very real, very painful impact on everyday purchases. When an apple costs you an arm and a leg, you know something's off.
Is that everything? Yes. All right, that'll be $50 billion.
$50 billion for an apple. Okay, it's exaggerated for comedic effect, but it perfectly captures the feeling of sticker shock people are experiencing at the grocery store. That F asterisk at the end is pretty much the collective sentiment of consumers right now. And it's not just groceries, it's affecting all sectors of the economy, especially those involved in global trade. This next clip captures the raw frustration of a trader watching the market crash due to these tariffs.
You may even get tired of winning, and you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore. Mr. President, it's too much. And I'll say, no, it isn't. We have to keep winning. We have to win more.
You may even get tired of winning. Oh, the irony. This guy on screen is clearly tired of losing all his money while Trump talks about winning. This perfectly illustrates how political rhetoric about trade wars translates directly to red lines on financial charts and real losses for individuals. It's not just a game. Finally, let's look at a video that attempts to explain tariffs from a Republican perspective, but ultimately just shows how flimsy the arguments for them really are when faced with economic reality.
Trump is going to ruin our economy with tariffs. Do you want our country to be in a trade deficit? No, why would I want that? Well, you just said you're against the tariffs that Trump is putting in place. You do realize that he's only price matching other countries' tariffs that they impose on us. What are you talking about? Well, since you guys love Canada so much, I'm just going to use that as an example. So we get a lot of our steel, aluminum, and copper from Canada. And they charge us 48% tariffs in copper and 45% tariffs in aluminum. So the whole point of Trump price matching other countries is so tariffs go down completely as a whole.
The price matching argument always cracks me up. Tariffs aren't a game of tit for tat where everyone suddenly agrees to lower them. They're taxes on our own consumers when we import goods. The goal isn't necessarily to lower tariffs globally, it's often to protect domestic industries, which then often results in higher prices for consumers and less choice. It's a simplistic view of a complex global economy.
But the Prime Minister of Canada said that he didn't want this. Yeah, of course he doesn't want it. If you're charging 270% tariffs for milk, I don't think you'd want to price match that either. All I'm saying is that Trump is price matching other countries' tariffs. And I don't see how that's a bad thing considering we are trillions of dollars in debt and that ratio needs to go down.
The Canadian Prime Minister not wanting it should tell you something. When you're talking about a 270% tariff on milk, that's an extreme example, not the norm. And trying to justify tariffs as a way to reduce national debt, that's a huge logical leap. Tariffs are consumption taxes paid by Americans. They don't magically make the national debt disappear. This ding sound just signifies the end of a flawed argument. All right, deep breath everyone. We've seen a lot today. Small business owners facing the consequences of their votes, farmers struggling with increased costs, the sheer cluelessness of some economic arguments, and the blatant denial of reality by others. The common thread here, a complete disregard for expert warnings and a shocking lack of foresight. Let's dissect this because there's a lot to unpack. The first thing that jumps out is the absolute hypocrisy of the I love this for you dynamic. For years, many of us, particularly those on the progressive side, have been advocating for policies that support everyone, not just a select few. We warned that economic nationalism, like broad sweeping tariffs, would hurt American consumers and businesses. We warned that alienating trade partners would lead to retaliatory measures. We warned that supply chains are complex and interdependent, not simple buy American buttons. And what did we get in return from the Trump base? Often ridicule, accusations of being unpatriotic, and a general dismissal of any concern not directly impacting them. The small business owner in video 1 and video 3, the man importing alloy wheels, openly admitted he knew about the tariffs but hoped things would be different for him. That's not a strategy, that's magical thinking. His despair is real and it's unfortunate, but it's a direct consequence of actively supporting a candidate who promised exactly what he delivered. The empathy he asks for was largely absent when the same policies were hurting other communities, or when his chosen leader was attacking marginalized groups. You can't vote to hurt others and then cry foul when the hurt circles back to you. The woman in video 1 and video 4, Tawny Michelle and A Girl Named Mikey, articulated this perfectly. Their no sympathy isn't cruelty. It's a frustrated response to a lack of shared responsibility and empathy from those now complaining. It's a reminder that political choices have real-world impacts on real people, and those impacts aren't always limited to the other side. The farmer in video 4, struggling with doubled prices for fiberglass steaks, is another heartbreaking but predictable example. Farmers, a crucial demographic for the previous administration, were often promised protection and prosperity. Instead, many faced increased costs for equipment, fertilizers, and even the packaging they need, all because of tariffs on imported goods. The idea that you can tax imports without American businesses and consumers bearing the cost is a fundamental misunderstanding of economics. Tariffs are not paid by China or Mexico. They are paid by the American importer, who then passes those costs on to the consumer. This leads directly to the kind of grocery price increases we saw in video 8 and video 9, $20 lettuce, $8 eggs, and an apple that costs $50 billion. These are not isolated incidents. They are systemic consequences of trade wars. Video 6, where Sunny Roselli breaks down the intricacies of the supply chain, should be mandatory viewing. Her explanation of secondary packaging, truck parts, and raw ingredients coming from China highlights just how deeply integrated the global economy is. It's not just about final products, it's about every single component that goes into making anything. When you impose a 104% tariff on certain goods, it doesn't just make those goods more expensive, it disrupts the entire flow of commerce, leading to shortages and even spoilage. The notion that we can simply pivot to Mexico or Canada for infinite supply is a fantasy. Global supply chains are built over decades, and they cannot be instantly replicated. The consequences she describes, food rotting, shelves empty, people going hungry, are not scare tactics, they are logical outcomes. Then we have the sheer disconnect from reality. In video 5, Trump claims groceries are substantially down, while the narrator correctly points out that most people are clipping coupons like it's my second job just to bring prices down. This isn't a difference of opinion, it's a difference between rhetoric and lived experience. When leaders make claims that are easily disproven by a trip to the local supermarket, it erodes trust and frustrates the very people they claim to represent. The phrase bullshit sandwiches is apt given the level of denial and misinformation. And finally, video 7, the mic drop moment, a federal court ruling Trump's tariffs illegal. This is a vindication for all those who argued that these policies were economically unsound and in some cases legally dubious. It shows that even the most powerful individuals are subject to the rule of law and the checks and balances designed to protect the economy from arbitrary and damaging decisions. This isn't just about political wins or losses, it's about the stability of the entire US economy and the livelihoods of millions of Americans. The narrative from some of these anti-tariff Trump supporters is often, it's unfair that I'm being hurt now. But where was that concern when the same policies, or others from the same administration, were hurting immigrants, marginalized communities, or even other American industries? The selective empathy is glaring. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but sometimes people only truly understand the consequences of their actions when those consequences hit their own pockets. So, what's the takeaway here? Voting matters. Understanding the actual impact of policies beyond sound bites and slogans matters. And empathy for others, even when it doesn't directly affect you, matters. Because, as we've seen, what goes around often comes around, and the consequences of economic nationalism can come home to roost in the most unexpected and painful ways. Let these videos be a lesson, a loud, clear, and slightly hilarious warning about what happens when you ignore the warnings. Let me know what you guys thought of these clips in the comments below. Have you experienced the impact of tariffs directly? Are your grocery bills making you cry? Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want more content that makes you think, and maybe laugh at the absurdity of it all. Until next time, stay informed, stay empathetic, and keep fighting the good fight. Peace. peace.
No more funding for transgenderism. No more funding for illegal DEI programs.
She's probably been put in there because, according to Donald Trump, she's a 10.
What started as a normal White House press briefing quickly turned into a firestorm. Caroline Leavitt, Trump's press secretary, didn't just answer questions. She went off on woke policies, causing a full-blown clash with the hosts of The View. Within hours, Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar fired back and things got personal fast.
Without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
But the controversy didn't just stay on TV. A lot of people had a lot to say. And today, I will give you the full story. Caroline Leavitt goes off on The View. On January 2025, Caroline Leavitt, at just 27 years old, stepped behind the White House podium for her first official press briefing as the newly appointed press secretary for President Donald Trump's second administration. Leavitt, whose political journey began with internships in the Trump administration before an unsuccessful congressional run in New Hampshire, had already made history as the youngest person to ever hold this prestigious position, breaking a record previously set during the Nixon era. During this inaugural briefing, Leavitt addressed questions regarding a federal funding freeze that had been implemented by the new administration. Her response would become the catalyst for the controversy that followed.
This is not a blanket pause on federal assistance and grant programs from the Trump administration. Individual assistance, that includes, I'm not naming everything that's included, but just to give you a few examples, Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, food stamps, welfare benefits, assistance that is going directly to individuals will not be impacted by this pause. So what does this pause mean? It means no more funding for illegal DEI programs. It means no more funding for the Green New scam that has cost American taxpayers tens of billions of dollars. It means no more funding for transgenderism and wokeness across our federal bureaucracy and agencies. No more funding for Green New Deal social engineering policies.
This definitive statement regarding wokeness would become the lightning rod for criticism from multiple media outlets, but perhaps none more prominently than ABC's The View. The daytime talk show, known for its politically charged discussions and predominantly liberal-leaning panel, wasted no time in addressing Leavitt's comments during their January 29, 2025 broadcast. Whoopi Goldberg, one of the show's longest-serving hosts, took particular exception to Leavitt's characterization of wokeness as something to be eliminated from federal funding. During the show's Hot Topic segment, Goldberg delivered an impassioned response.
I would like this young lady this is her first job, I would like her to do a little homework. Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me explain something to you. Because without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Yeah.
Because women were not invited to that table. Women were not invited to many tables in this nation. The reason we fought and busted our behinds to make sure that you didn't have to worry about this. And now to hear you talk about it and to hear anybody talk about the wokeness was put in place for a reason. Because black people couldn't get into colleges. Because women could not get into the colleges they wanted to go to. This is all women.
Goldberg's critique centered on a fundamental disagreement about the definition and importance of wokeness in American society. While Leavitt and the Trump administration portrayed it as unnecessary government spending on progressive social programs, Goldberg characterized it as the hard-won progress of civil rights movements that enabled women and minorities to access opportunities previously denied to them. But the criticism from The View didn't stop with Goldberg's comments on wokeness. Another host, Joy Behar, added a more personal critique of Leavitt that would further inflame the controversy.
Clarify, she's probably been put in there because, according to Donald Trump, she's a 10. You know that's what it is.
This comment from Behar suggested that Leavitt's appointment was based on her physical appearance rather than her qualifications, a remark that many viewers found particularly surprising, coming from a show with hosts who frequently position themselves as advocates for women's empowerment and against objectification. Other View hosts attempted to provide additional context, noting that this wasn't Leavitt's first job in politics and that she had worked in the previous Trump administration. However, the criticisms from Goldberg and Behar had already set the tone for how the segment segment would be perceived by audiences. For Levitt and the Trump administration, wokeness represented government overreach and unnecessary spending on progressive social programs that they believed did not serve the interests of most Americans. Her statement about ending funding for transgenderism and wokeness aligned with the administration's broader agenda, which included executive orders targeting DEI programs in federal agencies. For Goldberg and many of The View hosts, wokeness represented the critical social progress that had allowed historically marginalized groups to gain access to opportunities in education, employment, and political representation. From this perspective, Levitt's rejection of wokeness appeared to dismiss the importance of the very social changes that had made her own historic appointment possible. The controversy was further amplified by the fact that Levitt had already established herself as a vocal critic of The View months before this particular incident. In December 2024, before officially taking office as press secretary, Levitt had appeared on Fox News to discuss what she characterized as conspiracy theories being promoted on The View regarding President Trump and Elon Musk.
Absolutely not. Let me be unequivocally clear about that. And watching this clip, I couldn't help but think how ironic that Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar and the rest of the ladies on The View spend their time calling Republicans the conspiracy theorists. But they have been wrong about everything they have said over the last couple of years. They likened President Trump to Hitler. They have mocked him. They have shamed him. They have lied about him consistently. And it was a joy to watch them on November the 6th when they realized that tens of millions of Americans do not listen to the lies that they have spewed.
During this Fox News appearance, Levitt had characterized the hosts of The View as completely out of touch with reality, setting the stage for the contentious relationship that would develop once she officially took office as press secretary. The clash between Caroline Levitt and The View hosts didn't occur in isolation. It was part of a broader context of the Trump administration's return to power and the implementation of its policy agenda, including initiatives outlined in Project 2025, a comprehensive plan developed by the Heritage Foundation to align federal government operations with conservative principles. Project 2025, which had been published in April 2023, included specific proposals to eliminate what it termed woke propaganda at every level of government. The initiative advocated for restructuring federal agencies, reducing government size, and promoting traditional values, all themes that were reflected in Levitt's statements about ending funding for wokeness in federal bureaucracy. The comments from The View hosts also came at a time when the Trump administration was issuing a series of executive orders aimed at rolling back policies implemented during the Biden administration. On January 20th, 2025, Trump had signed Executive Order 14151, titled Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing, aimed at terminating diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives within federal agencies. Just a day before The View segment aired, on January 29th, 2025, the administration had issued another order directing agencies to shut down programs, grants, and initiatives that promote or reflect gender ideology, placing employees working on them on administrative leave. This order was explicitly part of the campaign to eliminate what the administration termed woke ideology from the federal government. In this highly charged political environment, Levitt's press briefing and The View hosts' responses became proxies for a larger cultural and political battle over the direction of American society. The controversy highlighted not just different policy preferences, but fundamentally different worldviews about the role of government, the meaning of equality, and the definition of progress. As news of the clash spread across social media and cable news, Americans quickly took sides, with conservative outlets praising Levitt's masterclass performance at her first press briefing and criticizing The View host for undermining a young woman's professional achievements, while progressive commentators defended the talk show host's concerns about the administration's rejection of wokeness as a potential step backward for civil rights. What started as a routine White House press briefing quickly turned into a major showdown, one that would ripple across American media for months to come. The woke conversation. The day after Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar's pointed criticisms of Caroline Levitt aired on The View, the media landscape erupted with reactions from across the political spectrum. What had begun as a critique of Levitt's comments about wokeness quickly transformed into a much broader discussion about media bias, women in politics, and the changing nature of political communication in America. Conservative media outlets rallied to Levitt's defense, highlighting what they perceived as hypocrisy from The View hosts, particularly in light of Joy Behar's comment suggesting suggesting Leavitt was hired for her appearance rather than her qualifications. Many commentators pointed out that such remarks seemed to contradict the show's usual advocacy for women's empowerment and against objectification. One online commentator captured this sentiment, stating, "Disgusting Joy Behar of The View accuses Karoline Leavitt of being hired only because Donald Trump thought she was a 10. Karoline Leavitt actually comes with real job qualifications, unlike Biden's DEI hires." Another added, "Karoline Leavitt was only hired by Donald Trump because she's a 10. You know that what it is. Actually, she's quite capable, unlike the last press secretary who was only hired because she was a black lesbian." The criticism of The View hosts extended beyond social media comments. Charlie Kirk, a prominent conservative commentator, described Behar's remarks as an idiotic and bitter thing to say, especially given what he characterized as Leavitt's masterclass performance at her first press briefing. Sky News host Paul Murray similarly praised Leavitt as a rock star, contrasting her approach with previous Biden administration press secretaries whom he accused of lying to people and circle around just telling lies. The controversy was further amplified by the fact that Leavitt's first press briefing had indeed made a significant impact, with clips of her exchanges with reporters circulating widely on social media. During the briefing, she had directly addressed what she perceived as bias in mainstream media coverage of the Trump administration.
While I vow to provide the truth from this podium, we ask that all of you in this room hold yourselves to that same standard. We know for a fact there have been lies that have been pushed by many legacy media outlets in this country about this president, about his family, and we will not accept that.
This confrontational approach to the press corps represented a notable shift from the previous administration's tone and signaled that the new White House communication strategy would involve directly challenging media narratives that they viewed as unfair or inaccurate. While the initial clash between Leavitt and The View hosts had centered on her comments about wokeness, the controversy quickly evolved to encompass a range of other issues, including debates about media integrity, the treatment of women in politics, and the appropriate role of daytime talk shows in political discourse. What made this controversy particularly noteworthy was that Leavitt never actually appeared on The View to respond to the host's criticisms. Instead, the conflict played out across separate media platforms, with Leavitt addressing White House reporters while The View host spoke to their television audience, and viewers and commentators from across the political spectrum weighing in via social media and other outlets. This disconnect led to some confusion and misinformation. In the days and weeks following the initial exchange, rumors began to circulate that Leavitt had actually appeared on The View for a direct confrontation with the hosts, or that Whoopi Goldberg had stormed off the set during a heated debate. Fact-checking efforts were required to clarify that no such direct interaction had occurred. The controversy occurred within a broader context of significant policy changes being implemented by the new Trump administration. In those early days of 2025, President Trump had signed a series of executive orders aimed at reshaping federal policies related to education, immigration, and social issues, many aligned with the conservative blueprint laid out in Project 2025. On January 30th, 2025, just a day after The View segment aired, Trump signed an executive order seeking to prevent schools from recognizing transgender identities or teaching about concepts such as structural racism, white privilege, and unconscious bias by threatening their federal funding. A week later, on February 5th, 2025, he signed another executive order banning transgender women and girls from participating in female sports in federally funded schools. These policy changes provided important context for understanding both Leavitt's original comments about ending funding for transgenderism and wokeness and the strong reactions they provoked from The View hosts and others. The controversy wasn't merely about terminology or political style, but about substantive policy changes that would affect millions of Americans. As the media storm continued to swirl around the clash between Leavitt and The View hosts, the new press secretary maintained her focus on implementing the administration's media strategy. She did not directly address the criticisms from The View in her subsequent press briefings, maintaining a professional demeanor while continuing to challenge what she perceived as bias in mainstream media coverage. However, on February 25th, 2025, Leavitt announced a significant change to White House press operations that many interpreted as an indirect response to the criticism she had faced from mainstream media outlets like The View. The Trump administration would be taking direct control of the White House press pool, determining which outlets would be granted access to cover presidential events, rather than leaving this decision to the traditional arbiter, the White House Correspondents Association, WHCA. In explaining this decision, Leavitt emphasized the administration's desire to end the monopoly of DC-based journalists over press access, and and to include what she termed new media outlets, such as podcasts and streaming services that better reflected modern media consumption habits. This policy shift was immediately controversial. Supporters viewed it as a necessary correction to perceived bias in mainstream media coverage and an opportunity to diversify the perspectives represented in the White House press corps. Critics, including the WHCA, saw it as an unprecedented infringement on press independence and a troubling sign for the future of political journalism. While defending these new press rules in April 2025, Levitt insisted that the changes were not about ideology, but about ensuring that Americans received accurate information about the administration's activities and achievements. However, the timing of the announcement, coming less than a month after the clash with The View, led many observers to see it as part of a broader strategy to reduce the influence of mainstream media outlets that the administration perceived as hostile. As February turned to March, the initial controversy began to fade from headlines, but its effects continued to reverberate through American political discourse. The clash had highlighted deep divisions, not just in policy preferences, but in basic understandings of concepts like equality, progress, and the proper role of government. For supporters of the Trump administration, Levitt had stood firm against what they perceived as unfair criticism and had demonstrated the administration's commitment to challenging mainstream media narratives. For critics, her comments about wokeness and the subsequent changes to press access represented troubling signs about the administration's approach to civil rights, media relations, and democratic norms. Throughout this period, rumors and misinformation continued to circulate on social media. By March 2025, claims began appearing that Levitt had filed a massive lawsuit against The View for defamation, seeking hundreds of millions of dollars in damages. These rumors were entirely false, with no evidence of any legal action being taken by Levitt against the show or its hosts. The reality was much more mundane. Levitt had continued her work as press secretary, holding regular briefings and implementing the administration's communication strategy, while The View hosts had moved on to discussing other topics in the fast-paced news cycle of 2025. Yet even as the specific details of the January controversy faded from public attention, the underlying tensions it had revealed between different media ecosystems, between competing definitions of concepts like wokeness, and between contrasting visions of American society continued to shape political discourse throughout the early months of the second Trump administration. The bigger picture. As spring 2025 arrived in Washington, what many social media commentators had predicted would be a catastrophic fall-off for either Caroline Levitt or The View hosts never materialized. Instead, a more nuanced reality emerged, revealing much about Levitt's meteoric rise, Whoopi Goldberg's established career, and how the implementation of Project 2025 continued to shape the political landscape. Caroline Levitt's ascension to one of the most visible positions in American politics represented a remarkable journey for someone so young. Born on August 24, 1997, Levitt had studied politics and communication at St. Anselm College, where she wrote for the school newspaper and founded a broadcasting club. Her political career began with an internship in the White House Office of Presidential Correspondence during the first Trump administration, after which she became its associated director. Following Trump's defeat in 2020, Levitt served as communications director for New York Representative Elise Stefanik before launching an unsuccessful campaign for the U.S. House of Representatives in New Hampshire's 1st Congressional District in 2022. Despite that setback, her loyalty to Trump and communication skills positioned her perfectly for a role in his second administration, culminating in her historic appointment as the youngest White House press secretary ever, at just 27 years old. This rapid rise contrasted sharply with the decades-long career of Whoopi Goldberg, one of her most vocal critics. Goldberg, born Karen Elaine Johnson in 1955, had established herself as an EGOT winner, Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony, long before joining The View in 2007. By 2025, she had served as moderator and co-host of the show for nearly 2 decades, becoming one of the most recognizable voices in daytime television. However, the clash between Levitt and The View hosts was far from the first time the daytime talk show had criticized Republican figures or policies. In fact, the program had developed a well-documented history of such criticisms, making it a frequent target of conservative media outlets. In 2022, Goldberg had referred to House Republicans as domestic terrorists during a discussion about a domestic terrorism bill. The comment came after Republicans voted against legislation that would have created domestic terrorism offices across 3 federal agencies, with Goldberg questioning, "What do you call the people who voted against this?" before providing her own inflammatory answer. Similarly, in 2018, Joy Behar had stated she was offended by Republicans during a heated discussion about a White House aid scandal, leading to a tense exchange with then-conservative co-host Meghan McCain. This pattern pattern of criticism extended back even further, with earlier instances including Rosie O'Donnell's pointed critiques of the Iraq War and President George W. Bush, which had sparked memorable debates with Republican co-host Elizabeth Hasselbeck. More recently, in 2024, conservative co-host Alyssa Farah Griffin had challenged Bihar over comments about Republicans not rebuking Donald Trump, with Griffin stating, "I've been doing it for 4 years," highlighting the ongoing tensions on the show even with a Republican voice present. These previous incidents contextualized the Levitt controversy as part of a longer pattern rather than an isolated incident. The show had earned its reputation as the most important political TV show in America, according to the New York Times, precisely because of its willingness to engage in provocative political discourse, often critical of Republican policies and figures. Still, for both Levitt and Goldberg, the January controversy had ultimately reinforced rather than diminished their standing with their respective bases. Conservative viewers saw Levitt as boldly challenging progressive media bias, while progressive viewers viewed Goldberg as courageously speaking truth to power. In America's polarized media environment, criticism from the opposing side often served to enhance rather than diminish one's credibility with one's own supporters. This dynamic was further illustrated by the continued struggles of The View to maintain a permanent Republican co-host. As reported by Politico, the show had faced challenges in finding and retaining conservative voices, with several potential candidates reportedly turning down the role due to concerns about being outnumbered by liberal co-hosts. This imbalance had contributed to the show's reputation for frequent criticism of Republican politicians and policies, creating an environment where conservative viewpoints were often challenged or dismissed. In response to this broader climate of political imbalance, both in media and in government, conservatives began building long-term strategies to reclaim influence. One major effort was Project 2025, which focused on 4 key pillars: a detailed policy agenda for federal agencies, a database to identify conservatives for government roles, training programs for conservative leadership, and a 180-day playbook for quick policy implementation. As described on its official website, the initiative aimed to address what conservatives viewed as major national challenges, including securing the border, de-weaponizing the federal government, unleashing energy production, cutting government spending, and improving education. The implementation of these policies provided the backdrop for the continuing tensions between Levitt and progressive commentators like Goldberg. When Levitt had spoken about ending funding for transgenderism and wokeness in her January press briefing, she was articulating a key aspect of Project 2025's vision, which called for eliminating what it termed woke propaganda at every level of government. The education section of Project 2025, authored by Lindsay M. Burke, proposed significant reforms, including eventually eliminating the Department of Education, promoting education savings accounts for school choice, and rejecting what it termed gender ideology and critical race theory in educational settings. These proposals aligned with executive orders signed by President Trump in late January and early February 2025. Critics of Project 2025, including organizations like the National Education Association and the American Civil Liberties Union, warned that these policies could undermine civil rights, reduce educational opportunities for disadvantaged students, and erode democratic norms. They pointed to potential impacts including 4.3 million workers losing overtime protections, 40 million people facing reduced food assistance, and rollbacks on reproductive rights. By April 2025, the influence of Project 2025 on the Trump administration's policies was evident, with nearly 2/3 of Trump's executive actions mirroring the plan's proposals. This implementation faced legal challenges, including a federal judge in Rhode Island indicating a temporary restraining order to block certain executive orders, though some memos had been rescinded or blocked earlier. Also, the policy changes Levitt had announced in February 2025, taking control of the White House press pool away from the White House Correspondents Association, aligned perfectly with Project 2025's goal of reducing the influence of what conservatives viewed as biased mainstream institutions. By adding new media outlets to the press pool, Levitt was implementing a strategy to diversify the perspectives represented in White House coverage, consistent with the project's emphasis on bypassing traditional gatekeepers. While defending these changes in April 2025, Levitt insisted they were not about ideology, but about ensuring Americans received accurate information about the administration's activities. This framing reflected Project 2025's broader narrative about restoring power to the American people by challenging what it described as entrenched elite institutions. As partisan polarization have continued to deepen, Republicans and Democrats have become increasingly critical of people in the opposing party. The back and forth between Levitt and The View host showed just how deep today's political divisions run. It wasn't just about about disagreeing on policies anymore. It was about clashing worldviews, with both sides seeing the other as a real threat to the future of America. Thanks for watching. Check out our videos for more political commentary.